Welcome to Finlos Teaches. Teaching is a difficult job. It requires long hours, which include planning lessons, meeting with peers and administrators, interacting with students and parents, grading, and more, all on a daily basis. In addition, as a group of licensed professionals, educators are required to maintain ongoing education and training to account for the latest research and best practices, as well as federal, state, and local policy changes. As much as that brief overview describes, a few words cannot account for the myriad ways that teachers are pulled, stretched, called upon to do more, adding layers of stressors while reducing the non-work time necessary for self-care and personal well-being. And all of this was true even before the COVID-19 pandemic, which only exacerbated these issues. The National Education Association, the largest teacher union in the United States, released a survey in February of 2022 that found that 55% of its members were ready to leave the profession. The survey also found that in the past year, 80% of members indicated that unfilled positions have led to more work. 90% described burnout as a serious problem, and 91% noted that pandemic-related stress is an ongoing obstacle to daily work. Second only to increased pay, additional mental health support for both students and teachers was the most supported potential method of beginning to meet some of the needs of educators. Jen DeRemer is one such teacher who recently made the tough decision to leave her classroom to pursue an education-adjacent job where she can employ her skills and training in a position that provides better compensation, less stress, and similar benefits. While it was a difficult decision to make and she remains open to returning under different circumstances, leaving the classroom was the only viable option for her. Jen recently sat with me for this interview. So just to get us started, could you just introduce us to who you are, a basic rundown of your educational experience in terms of what you tended to teach and where's the last place you were teaching?
Sure. So I'm Jen DeRemer, and I have been a teacher for about 15 years. I started in 2007 in South Florida in Fort Lauderdale. And then I got married and I moved to El Paso, Texas, and I taught high school there again. So I taught ninth grade my very first year, and then I taught 4 years of ninth and 10th grade, and I taught pre-AP mostly. And then I came back to Florida and I moved to Jacksonville and I started teaching middle school there. And so I've been teaching 8th grade language arts ever since. And I taught 5 of those years as a solely gifted English teacher. And then the last 3 years I've taught advanced and standard language arts for 7th and 8th grade.
So comparing Florida to Texas, what are some of the big differences that you can talk about between the two states?
I could say that it was totally different atmospheres because I went from, um, school that was probably in terms of the grade system that we have in Florida, kind of like a C school, to where in El Paso I taught we were about to be Title I. It was we were right at the border of Juarez. And so it was a very different, completely different kind of administrative atmosphere, to where they weren't so much focused on, what was going on in the classroom as much as they were focused on the behavior aspect of the students. So a little different. I did, they tried to, at least in that particular school, put in a STEM program. And so I was the English teacher for the STEM kids. So those were more the the pre-AP kids. But it's a different culture, first of all, for sure, because it's so close to the border that it's far and away different from South Florida. It's more of the cultures are different. You go from a more Hispanic Mexican culture to kind of where I was, where it was a melting pot, and it was mostly kids that were Hispanic. I had a lot of kids that were Haitian and spoke Creole, and I had just a whole kind of melting pot. So both, definitely I dealt with a lot of English as a second language, so that was prevalent in both areas. But for the most part, I feel like the experiences were a little bit different just in terms of what administration really was focused on.
Mm. So, in relation to those different administrative expectations, do you feel as if no matter what the style was in terms of the more behaviorally focused administrative policies versus the academic, do you think your administrators were supportive, and what did that support look like?
You mean in Texas?
Either or both.
Either. I felt like definitely in South Florida for sure. There, it seems like more supportive atmosphere. It was a different time period too because it was when I started teaching. My degree is in English lit, and so my very first job actually out of college was doing admissions for a proprietary university called Kaiser University, which I think they have in Tallahassee as well. And so I got kind of sick of that because it was basically just me being in a cubicle. And I heard a radio ad that they were looking for teachers, and all you needed was a degree. And so that's pretty much how I got into teaching. Is I really hate this job. Let me try teaching because I have this degree that really is kind of you can't really do much with straight out of college. So I went to a big convention center and I stood in line for my little interview. And after my second interview, I got a job teaching, and then that was it. Like, then I started 2 months later. So there was a lot of support because there was a lot of new teachers, and I felt like they were, really trying to make the transition for those people that were, there were a few of us that were kind of straight up out of college. Whereas in Texas, it wasn't, it depends on the administrator, but it wasn't very supportive as far as like the the education aspect of it, like making sure we had, PD and like really trying to appeal to like what we're interested in and how and help us grow as educators. I really did not feel that at all. So a lot of the PD, there was just exorbitant amount of meetings and things that all related to sort of behavior and how we were going to make sure that our school doesn't get to that like Title I designation.
Yeah, that label means a lot for sure. I teach at a Title I school now, so like I can sympathize with that. And it's interesting you're noting that how you're an alt cert person. I am as well. Like I got into it. My degrees was also in English, and then I went to one of those cattle calls at the Tallahassee Civic Center, and that's exactly how I got into it as well. It's interesting because yeah, I've known more teachers to stick around longer in the classroom via that route than those people who like went to a college of ed or came about education in a more traditional way. It's interesting how the people who have gone through colleges of ed, in my experience, this is purely anecdotal, I don't know if there's any data to support it, but they tend to transition more rapidly into administration or into other out of the classroom educational gigs like consultation or working for College Board or something like that. Whereas alt cert people like us who don't go that traditional route, I don't know why we've ended up in the classroom for so long. It's crazy how that happens.
That is kind of funny.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, what was the biggest surprise when you did get into the classroom for the first time that first year? What was the biggest surprise, and maybe even the hardest thing? They might even be the same thing.
Well, it was kind of a shock, not really a shock, but it was a definite surprise for me because I came in teaching freshmen, and it was just a regular standard English class, and so my own experience was so different that I kind of expected everybody's experience to be the same, and I expected them to have skills that they definitely didn't have. So it was a lot more difficult for me to find ways to like meet them where they are and meet them where they were at, and then also like obviously help them better their skill set. And so it was just kind of it was more of me learning, what it's like to be a teacher and having kids that are all different levels. I mean, I had like kids that were in a standard class, but they were kind of all over the place. I had really like smart kids that could have really benefited from the advanced class. And then I just remember having one girl she hardly spoke. And I just confused by why she was like, it seemed like had selective mutism, but she didn't. She just didn't come to find out that she just really didn't speak the language. And she had moved from Miami into Broward County, and none of her like ESOL or and it turns out she also had an IEP. None of that information like ended up in the hands of admin to like place her properly or get her the support that she needed. So it was a lot of like trying to figure out, how am I supposed to help her if I don't really know what the problems are? And as a first year teacher, you're like, I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm like literally winging it by the seat of my pants, like whatever sounds cool, I'm doing it, and trying to really get the buy-in of the kids so that I can kind of, help them grow in their skill set. But yeah, I guess it was that I went, like I had mentioned to you before, like I did an IB program, so it was a lot more accelerated than the average curriculum, and I just didn't really think that was. I thought that was kind of like normal that most kids would do, and then I was like, oh gosh, like that's super cautious of me to think something like that. I should probably bring it down. So it was a lot of trying to figure out what is it that they really need and how do I get them there in the enjoyable way possible, because they clearly have no interest in this. So.
And you said this is your 15th year, so what kept you coming back each year?
The kids. I love the kids. I feel like I'm still like 19 in my head. And so the kids are really what kind of keeps me going back. And in some classes, in some schools, I should say, it was my coworkers. I just really enjoyed it. And yeah, I really was the kids, because I didn't really anticipate this being a long-term career for me. I had no real clue as to what I was going to do, but I was like, I'll figure it out eventually and then I'll move on. But then after, year 10, 12, 13, 14, you're like, oh, okay, here I am.
Right. Still here. Yeah,
I am
exactly.
still here with you guys. So yeah, it was mostly the kids. I really loved being, particularly more than middle school. I really liked that age group a lot. So they grew on, yeah.
So as you think back, I know that so often we are, put to the grindstone, and we're so focused on our kids and lesson planning and getting ready and all of those sorts of things. Did you ever feel any external pressures or any sort of political adversity kind of finding its way into your classroom, or have you mostly felt pretty protected from that?
Oh no, yeah, there's been several incidences of feeling that pressure. The last few years have been mostly contending with our evaluation system. Like, I don't know what you guys use in Tallahassee. Like, we in St. Johns County use Marzano. And so there's just a lot of pressure. And it really depends on the school, I feel like, because I've switched to two different schools since I've lived here. And one was just using this measurement to like supposedly help you improve. And it was just kind of like something they had to check off a list. And that's how I felt about it
Is
too,
what are
because that was,
the 41 elements, right? Marzano's 41
yeah,
elements. Yep.
right. And so the idea at one school was like, this is just something we have to do, check it off, everything's great. And so when I moved schools, it became like a gotcha. It became like, well, you're not like touching every single kid. And so, we're going to dock you on this evaluation. And of course, I'm like, whatever, I don't really care about this. This doesn't mean I'm a good or bad teacher. But it does hurt your feelings a little bit when you're like getting docked for things that that you do, like, you're a good teacher. And I just felt that it turned into a big gotcha. Like, what can we find that you're not doing, as opposed to what are you doing well? And then certainly after the shooting at Parkland, like, I think in one particular school, it became kind of a little bit of a political issue, because like, I'm from South Florida. I grew up not too far from Parkland. That was really important to me, to go out and support. We did like a women's march here at St. Augustine, and I had several of my students that came out, And so we marched and we had signs and they took some pictures and gave them to me at the end of the year. And so I have a big board where I had pictures of all sorts of things that are important to me, letters that have been written to me, pictures of students, and then just little things that I feel like kind of embody, my personal beliefs. And I say personal beliefs, but I feel like they're just common decency. And I have one sign in particular, aside from those photos, I have one sign that says, like, this is no hate zone, and it has like a rainbow flag in the background. And then I have another that was a meme that I kind of blew up and laminated, and I'm sure you've seen it. It's like science is real, that whole thing. um, and so I've always just kind of displayed it there. I've never really like made mention of it. I've never really pointed to it or been like, here's all of my beliefs, let's talk about them. But I had one year, my last year at this particular school, where I had a student take pictures of my board without me knowing, and then show them to her mom, and then that parent went to the principal, and then the principal wanted me to take them down, because he said they were like too political, and that it seemed as if I was pushing my own political beliefs or agenda onto the students. And so I declined. I said, well, I'm going to really talk to my union about this, because I don't feel like that's appropriate to do. I don't feel like I should have to do that. And so it became a point of contention between me and administration, because they really wanted me to take it down, and I really didn't, and I didn't have to, according to my union rep. And so it just kind of became a little like a sticking point. And I definitely felt like, without even speaking to me about how I'm presenting ideas in the classroom, they just assume that I step on a soapbox and, preach my own particular agenda to these students. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So it wasn't much long after that I switched schools and did the exact same thing, and no one said anything. And they stayed there without any issue. So it is depends on the school, depends on the area, depends on, the kids. But that to me is, that's probably the extent of my
And it's really
sort of.
frustrating because, something like that, you have this point of contention. The student has the right to ask, and the parent has the right to ask, and all of that is fine. But it's that moment when you and your administrator have the disagreement, and okay, you're the union backed you, but now you have to always be questioning, like, how is this going to come back to haunt me in the
Right.
future? And you just never know, because right, they can't necessarily fire you for that, but
Right.
there's all sorts of things that administration might choose to do, like change what classes you're going to be teaching next year, or
Mhm.
change what your planning periods are, and all of these
Mhm.
little things that are so petty, but you just never know how that's going to play out. So yeah,
Oh yeah.
that really stinks, and I'm happy that you were able to move to a better school, or not better school, but a school where you felt more supported.
Yeah, and it was already kind of at the point where, and it soon followed thereafter. Like, I was the team lead for our eighth grade team, and I basically was the only one that would volunteer to do any of these like additional activities for kids. Like, I was the one that organized, field trips, like all over the place. Every year we'd go somewhere different. I was the one that would organize the end of the year field trips and all the activities for kids. And so I did all of these things, mostly because I wanted to, because I felt like, they deserved all these great opportunities. But I never, and not that I needed the recognition, but I didn't receive any recognition from administration for like going above and beyond. And then there was some other teacher that was brand new, and she started a club or something. And at the end of the year, they just made this like huge deal out of it. And I was like, but wait a minute, like, what about me?
Right.
And so at that moment, I was like, I know what this is about. I get it. And that's okay. That's all right. So it was just, it's really depends on, you know, the not just administration, but the parent input was big. We have a lot of parent involvement, and so they tend to kind of all it takes is one parent to really
That's
say
all it
that they
takes.
don't like it,
It really
and
is.
then it becomes this huge thing that suddenly all parents are against it. So
And it seems like
it's frustrating.
it's like not to be specifically about the current political atmosphere, but it seems as in the time that I've been in the classroom that balance of power has definitely shifted more towards the voice of the parent always carrying way more weight than anybody else's voice, and then administrators almost seeming to it's more expedient to simply do away with the teacher and then not even have the
Mhm.
conversation, and that's really frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's a lot easier, which, makes it so that some teachers just, that's not the hill they're going to die on. So, and that was always my phrase, what is the hill I'm going to die on? Because that's, if it's about something like making sure that all my students feel comfortable coming into my classroom and don't feel like they're going to be, made fun of or something like that. Yeah, I'll do that. But if it's, the kid got an 89.4 and not the A, whatever, dude, have the A. Like it became one of those things where there's certain things I'll fight on it, and there's other things I just won't. And that's unfortunate because why should I have to compromise, the what is correct, what is, true, to appease a parent who's really just trying to, I don't know, especially if in my school where it was like a lot of grade mongering type of thing, where it's like, is it that serious that your kid can't possibly get anything below an A, and so we're just gonna make a big huge stink about it? It's middle school.
They'll be fine.
You'll be okay. This isn't like your GPA to get into Harvard. You'll be all right.
And also
So
the grade is reflective of the work that you're completing.
correct,
So it's like,
correct.
yeah, actually your child is a B
Earned
student.
that.
And that's fine. And
Right.
that's the whole point, is that
Yes.
that's okay. Like, what is wrong with a B? There's nothing wrong with a B.
Well, that is a great question. Like, there's nothing wrong with the bee. I don't. To me, I think that's perfectly fine. But it became this sort of like, tug of war between, and a lot of it. I mean, I don't know if they have this at your school too, but it was like at our school at one point, students couldn't earn anything under 50%, whether they did the work or not, and then they can retake tests up, until they get, in some schools in our district, back up until 100%. In other schools, it's 85%. So it's all of these, you know, things that make it that much easier for a student to do well. But it's like 15 times more difficult for you because now you're having to recreate all the resources, tests, time, um,
Like
and the kids know that.
we don't have other things to do,
Right.
or
Well,
that
and the
are
kids know that too. They
right.
know that they don't have to study the first time around because they can always retake it. So it's like, why?
So if you don't mind me asking, this is going to be your for the foreseeable future, your last year in the classroom.
Correct. Yep.
Can you
Yep.
tell us, generally speaking, are you still going to be education adjacent or related?
Yes. So I actually just started. This is my first week. I'm a training developer. It's kind of like instructional design for a healthcare company. So it is still education related. I'll still be facilitating training and then also creating like e-courses and e-learning. So it was important to me to stay in education. I mean, I have a lot of experience in it, and it's what I feel most comfortable doing and what I enjoy doing. So it became mostly out of necessity, to be honest, with the way things are going. That it's financially impossible for me to stay a teacher. And so I'm a single parent. I have two kids, and I can't afford to take care of myself, let alone my own children. So I had no choice. And unfortunate because our district, my district in particular, has been like number one in the state for like 10 years. Their whole shtick has always been every superintendent or the last two that, this is a great place to work. Everybody wants to work here. I'm like, yeah, but nobody can afford to live here. Like, you can't live within this area. So why is this going to be so great for me to drive an hour to get to work? It's not worth it. And even when our unions are negotiating salaries, I mean, it's like basic, a couple $1,000 is not going to really make or break anything. And so it became that was like top reason why I had to leave. And then, of course, I feel like, again, depending on the type of administration and leadership you have, had leadership where, luckily, this past year we got new leadership, and so it's been much more enjoyable. But the last couple of years that I've been thinking about it, like I said, everything was a gotcha. It was always trying to find what you were doing wrong, and it was very, it was just kind of, I don't know, imprisoning. I just didn't feel like it was very fun to be a teacher anymore.
That's really sad because,
Yeah.
we're teaching should be fun. You're dealing with children. It doesn't even matter if they're middle schoolers or high, they're still children. And if we're not having fun, then what's the point?
Right. And that's, they come to school and, and you and them are trying to make the best of the situations that you're in and trying to make learning fun so that, they enjoy coming to school and you enjoy coming to school. So yeah, it became really just depressing. So both of those coupled together, that's when I really started thinking like I have to leave. I can't stay.
Can you speak a little bit about how the past 2 years, especially since COVID, how that changed your experience as a teacher?
Yeah, I mean, I had already been really dabbling with like a blended learning model. So when COVID came around and we went, virtual, like I was pretty comfortable with that. And actually during that time is when I got the idea of perhaps doing instructional design because I'd already started, I already kind of figured that was the way we were heading in education, at least in our district. So it definitely changed the way that I thought about delivering content and how to make it, how to reach kids where they're at because I tried very much to be more of a facilitator and like self-pace things because I had kids that were on all different spectrums, some that were like gifted and some that were not, that needed, extra interventions. And it's really hard to, differentiate. I, that was the big, educational term for the last few years for me anyways. And so that was how I was able to do that, is to find ways to make it more self-paced and then be more of like the facilitator in the room or in the classroom, as they're working independently. The COVID situation for us, it was difficult to do both because we ended up the following year having to teach both in school or having to teach both virtually and in person at the same time. And as the waves kind of went in and out, it became nearly impossible to keep up with who was in, who was out, how we were doing this. So I felt like everything, my instruction anyways, I felt like it really slowed down a lot because I had to account for, if he's going to be out for, if Johnny's going to be out for 10 days, like if he's out, that means he's going to take 20 of his friends out because they all sat near him. So it was pretty difficult to keep track of what was happening. So I felt like these kids coming in are kind of, we're trying to play catch up. And then to add insult to injury, our state got all new standards and all new textbooks, and we're still trying to catch these kids up. And it was just, this year was, I felt to me, was just kind of like impossible. I was just surviving. I mean, I don't know how you felt, but it was hard. It was really, really difficult to just not only deal with the repercussions of their learning deficiencies, but that because of COVID, but now it's like, here's more stuff for you to do. Here's more different standards, different textbooks,
Well, I
totally
mean,
every
in essence,
reinvent the wheel.
we've been in crisis mode for 2 years straight,
Yeah,
and
right.
so we're not only trying to be decent instructors, but we're also tending to the mental health of our students, and it's a
Oh
lot.
yeah,
It's a lot, and it felt as if the expectations of teachers and um, yeah, those expectations just kept on increasing. Like now, not only are we
right,
monitoring the health and safety of our students in class, but we're also supposed to be monitoring those who are not in class over the cameras, and it just and then
right,
when students fall behind inevitably because we're in the middle of a pandemic, it's our
right,
fault that we were not delivering effective instruction,
right.
and then that gets used as a bludgeon to kind of like hammer us down again, and it all definitely, I think, in this past year has just added up. Like things have teaching. I don't think we're ever told when we get into it is going to be an easy profession, and I think we all kind of do that knowingly. But it's definitely been a particularly trying couple of years, just in terms of cultural support. Luckily
Hmm.
my administrators are fantastic, and that hasn't been an issue. But just community support, just the
Right.
way that people view teachers is it just seems very
Hmm.
antagonistic, and I have to remind people, it's like
Right.
like the teachers who teach your children collectively spend more time with your kids than you do.
Right. Right.
You think you'd support them just a little bit more, but no.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even, and it's so sad because I know I know organizations like PTO or PTA or whatever, like they do their best, but it always feels very like pejorative. It always feels really like, oh, you're cute little teacher. Here's your, like here's your coffee. I hope that makes you feel better. And I'm like, no, actually, this is trash. Like I would really love a raise or like
Yes.
something that makes it more worthwhile. Like getting a cup of
Yes.
coffee and a donut in the morning does not make anything better.
Yeah, no, an extra planning hour or a 4-day work week where students are in 4 days and we get 1 day for planning, like any of those things,
Yeah,
like one thing on the infinitely long checklist would be great, but no, not a cup of coffee, really.
right. And that's kind of the thing that, as much as I get it, like they're trying, it's just as a whole, it's just not enough. I just feel like at one point we were like the heroes during COVID, and now they're like, no, you're not doing enough. Like my kid's failing, or you failed to put this on because now, of course, that we have everything on like a learning management system, it's like, well, you were supposed to put this on your learning management system and you didn't. So now he gets 2 extra days. I'm like, but what, like all of these things, all of these new things that now we're expected to do because we had to do them during COVID. Just another thing on the checklist to do, and the checklist is long and there's not enough hours in the day, and the onus can't possibly always be on the teacher. Like there has to be some sort of equity here because I can't force anybody to do anything they don't want to do. So it's a
Burnout is,
burnout is
I think
real.
it's inevitable
Yeah,
for teachers at the best of times, and there have been
correct.
great years, and I'm still doing it. I'm still in the classroom,
Right.
and I it's there are good times, but uh, burnout, as you say, burnout is real, and it's there are the consequences, and I mean, I don't know what it's like in your county, but here in Tallahassee, teachers are leaving. We have there are vacancies that have not been filled this entire year because we just can't get
Yeah.
teachers who they come but they don't stay. They can't. It's unmanageable.
Yeah.
It is untenable for a new teacher, and they're raising starting teacher salary. So when I started, it was the base pay was something like 29,000, but base pay now is 40,000 plus, great.
Right.
They're still leaving. It's not enough.
Right.
The pay is
No,
only,
it's not.
it's only a piece of that puzzle.
Right. And it's when I started in South Florida, right, it was around that. And then I moved to Texas, and actually the starting rate over there was 45. And the cost of living was just, I mean, nothing. We sight unseen had to rent something quickly. It was a 4-bedroom house, and it was $900 a month.
Wow.
And yeah, and it was like, oh, that was what I was renting my 1-bedroom apartment in South Florida for. So I was like, okay, I'll take a 4-bedroom house. Like, not that I needed it, but I'm like, it's the same amount, so why wouldn't I? So 10, when I started over there, I was making, basically, by the time I left Texas, I was making the same amount that I'm making now, and that was, over 10 years ago. So and the cost of living here is 3 times that. So I don't know how new teachers do it. We have, vacancies galore, and we're supposed to be building in this county an extra, over the next 5 years. I think it's something like 20 schools.
Wow.
Yeah, because this area is blowing up, and so I don't know how they're going to staff these schools. I have no idea. There's a school that's supposed to open next year. It's not. I don't foreseeably see it opening next year. There's just not enough people to staff it, unfortunately. And so I don't know what they're gonna do. Teachers are leaving. They just keep building schools, and no one's interested in this profession because it's just, first and foremost, you have to be able to take care of yourself. And if you can't do that on the salary that you're paying your teachers, then they're going to find somewhere else. And there's a lot of places that are looking for teachers. The skill set that we have is, like, it's unmatched, I feel like.
Absolutely. I think that you can take a teacher with a few years of experience in the classroom and drop them in
Mm-hmm.
almost any profession, and they can learn
Oh yeah,
real quick.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so it doesn't. But I think as teachers, we're used to feeling like that's all we can do. Like, I really feel, and all the teachers that I've spoken to, that after I told them that I got a new position outside of the classroom, they're like, how did you do that? I'm like, well, you have skills. Like, look at all the years of things that you've been able to do, the people that you're able to manage, the content that you're able to learn and then teach. Like, that's amazing. But yeah, I feel like we've been kind of emotionally beaten down to be like, well, that's all, you're just a teacher.
Just a
You're
teacher.
just a teacher.
Just a
You're just a
teacher.
teacher. And I just,
Oh,
oh my God, it just burns. Like, it really burns. So I feel that teachers are kind of becoming wise to that they're not just teachers, and it's just not worth it to them anymore to be seen in that way.
so
It's unfortunate.
so you started your new position.
Mm-hmm.
What was
Yep.
packing up your classroom like?
Uh, you know, I left a lot of things in my classroom because I just didn't want them to feel like empty. I gave away, I've had 15 years worth of stuff that I have, like, moved around. It was weird. It was so weird. I had one thing that was really weird was I've amassed, like, a huge library of books. And so I was like, I can't pack all these books. Like, first of all, I have an e-reader now, and I don't really need all these books, but I'm like, I can't possibly pack all this up and put it in a storage unit. So I was like, I'm just gonna give it away. And so, of course, my students were like, "You're giving these away?" And it was just, free for all. They just ran towards all my books, and which was incredibly, like, endearing to see them so excited over these books. But I was like, "Oh no, my library!" I took so many years because I probably had thousands and thousands and thousands of books. So that was really gut wrenching to let go of that. And and then giving away supplies to teachers. I just opened up my closet doors. I was like, come to me, come get my supplies. And it felt kind of good to know that I was kind of closing this chapter and starting a new one. But it was definitely, it definitely hurt a little bit, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to start a new year. I wasn't going to, pack all this stuff up and bring it back. And yeah, it was kind of sad. Like the end of a good book. It's like, it feels good where I'm ending. It felt like it was a good time for me, but it was definitely sad to see it end. Yeah.
And what's exciting now? What has been the experience of kind of beginning something new?
It feels like every day is like the day, because I work from home now, so there's I don't see anybody on my day to day, which is so weird because I'm introverted, and so it was so hard for me every day after school to just, like, my energy would be gone. Like I'd have to take a nap before I can actually, like, continue with the rest of my evening. And so now I'm like, I have all this energy because I don't see anybody, but that's also kind of sad and depressing too, because I'm the only one around unless I have like some sort of meeting virtually with my coworkers. But it's exciting to have energy back. It's exciting to, feel like I'm learning something new. After a while, especially when you've been doing it for a long time, things get pretty rote, and so it's really cool to be the student again, learn like new things, and kind of see how my ability to, like, the skill of learning something new and, kind of compartmentalizing that information and kind of learning how to process it so that I can then teach somebody else. Like I am doing that for my new job, so that's kind of cool to see that process again, like not in the context of English, like for other things. And I'm excited to, get a living wage. Like that's super exciting to me. I'm really stoked for that. Really stoked. And everyone's just been really nice. Like it's just been a really nice, slower pace type of experience. So
Well, congratulations.
thank you.
Yeah, it's a brave thing to leave something that obviously you're good at and you're comfortable with, and to start in a new venture. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's scary for sure. And I have 2 kids of my own, and I'm scared for them and like what public education is going to look like for them, knowing that there's other teachers like me that are leaving. And so that's, it's a really scary possibility to know, especially I have one that's in 7th grade and one that's in 2nd grade. I'm like, in a few years, I wonder what is education going to look like for my 2nd grader? How are things going to, because something has to give as more teachers are leaving, what's going to happen? What is going to go on? How is their experience going to change when there aren't enough adults in the room to take care of all the kids and be responsible for them?
Well, if we look at the history of education, it's just kind of like the history of most things, where it happens in cycles. So
Right.
Hopefully in a few years hopefully it'll swing back. We can be positive in that way.
I absolutely hope so. And I said to that, if things change, I would absolutely go back into the classroom.
And that they will always need you. That you will.
And they will always, exactly.
Exactly.
And that's kind of the cool thing about education, is you will always be needed. There's always a space for you somewhere.
Absolutely.
So, for now, this is the trajectory I'm headed. And, if things change and there's possibility for change, I'm here for it. And I really sincerely hope that it does.